Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5 Facts. I'm Tony Southcott, and today we're talking about Zardoz. It's a 1974 film from John Boorman. It's weird. It's very weird. It's starring Sean Connery and Charlotte Rampling, and it is one of the oddest movies that you will honestly ever encounter. And I kind of like the charm that it has for that, but let's get into some of the facts, and then we'll talk about the movie afterwards. Fact number 1, don't waste Sean Connery's time, and don't put him in too much makeup. Sean Connery actively hates makeup. He hates the feeling of that sort of thing on his skin, and there's only one particular sequence at the end of this movie where it shows him and Rampling slowly rotting away, or basically aging and then rotting away. The process took many hours, and on the first day they were able to complete it, but they found a very bad flaw in the film, so they had to redo it. Sean Connery was already pissed about this, already complaining, already getting up in the crew's face about it, but he endured it. He got through the second time, and as soon as they finished this, the assistant camera person ended up overexposing the film. Just completely ripped it open, saw everything got exposed to light, and was completely unusable. So, they told Sean Connery he was going to have to do it one more time, and he kind of went crazy. He ended up attacking this camera assistant. He grabbed them by the throat and had to have 3 different grips actually pull him off of this guy. John Boorman said, "Sean wouldn't believe me. He thought I was teasing him. When I convinced him that when we needed to do a third time, he went after the camera loader and nearly killed him. It took 3 grips to restrain him." So definitely don't mess with Sean Connery. Fact number 2, directors should be very careful when adding themselves to the movie. During a sequence about 20 minutes into the film, we see Sean Connery's character Zed shooting a character who was farming for them, basically a slave-type person. This was actually John Boorman, the director of the film. John Boorman was a little bit too close, and the wadding of the gun ripped out of the barrel, and it lodged itself in his head. It took several days before he could actually get the wadding from this blank out of his face. Let this be a warning to all those directors out there, Night Shyamalan, that if you put yourself in the movie too much, you might end up having some bad things happen. Fact number 3, the 5 categories in this people have a very specific meaning. On the commentary track, Boorman explains the various categories among the populace, and I've added what I think they represent. The renegades are the old folks condemned to eternal salinity, which signify the elderly in society. The Eternals, who have been rebuilt into younger bodies, which I personally believe represented the political and financial elite. They are the ones that controlled everything, including the Brutals, the Exterminators, the Apathetics, and the Renegades. The hapless Brutals are the people that are struggling outside. This would be the lower class and middle class who really don't have any sort of power. The Exterminators, like Zed, whose job is to keep the brutal population in check, would stand for the police state or just tyranny in general. The Apathetics, I believe, are probably the youth that have lost any sort of interest in life, especially among the super wealthy, where they're just kind of out there not really doing anything at all. There's nothing required of them, and nobody really cares all that much. They have no hope for a future, so why should they participate in anything? They're immortal. They don't have to figure it out tomorrow, the next day, or 100 years from now. Fact number 4, a communist newspaper took particular interest in this film. When the film opened in France, a communist newspaper wanted Boorman to sign a contract acknowledging that he had not based the giant head on Vladimir Lenin and was not poking fun at communism. He gladly signed this, knowing that the giant head that is all throughout this movie was actually based on his own face and head. The paper would go on to be one of the very few that gave it a completely glowing review, whereas most papers, critics, and other people that went to see the movie had very, very mixed reactions to it, teetering towards the negative side. Fact number 5, popcorn facts. Zardoz has obviously influenced many different movies and TV shows, including an episode of Rick and Morty. Show me what you got! I actually know this because Dan Harmon, on one of his episodes of his podcast, was talking about Zardoz specifically and just how strange the movie was and how much he absolutely loves it. The horse with the topless woman riding it was named Snowy, and it belonged to Boorman and his family. It was ridden by my children for many years, he says, but not bare-breasted, I might add. When the horse died, they cut his tail off and attached it to a rocking horse, so something of him still remains. There's a shot in the first 5 minutes of the film when Zed looks directly into the camera, points the gun, and fires. This is actually a tribute to the Great Train Robbery from 1903. It also kind of harkens back to whenever James Bond would fire into the camera. But from that range, it was more like the Great Train Robbery, which Sean Connery a few years later would actually star in the remake of. During a scene that showed Connery in a cage, there was a baboon on the set. There was also a man in a baboon suit on the set in another cage. The baboon didn't take too kindly to this man being dressed like it, so it decided to maul him. Thankfully, no one was hurt that badly from this, and none of the animals were hurt. Originally, Boorman was writing a movie adaptation for Lord of the Rings, but the production company balked over budget concerns. Instead, John would turn his sights to an original picture, and thus Zardoz came to be. So imagine this guy instead of Peter Jackson with 1974 technology making Lord of the Rings. I can only imagine how strange that would be, and how probably non-epic. Kind of glad we got the versions we did, even with all the faults in that one. Zardoz, man. Zardoz was definitely something. It's a movie that would crumble with lesser actors. It's a film that flat out shouldn't work and often doesn't work. But I still enjoy it despite all the massive red Speedo wearing flaws. It's a movie about humans transcending mortality, getting bored enough to fall into a stupor and manipulating the lesser beings. It's about petty gods, exactly like the Wizard of Oz, which actually becomes a huge plot point later in the movie and is the reason why it's called Zardoz. The director himself said, "When I see the film now, I'm astonished at my hubris in making this extraordinary farrago." And farrago is basically a word that means a confusing mess. He understands what he was trying to do, and he knows that in a lot of ways he missed the mark. Some ways he got some good commentary in there, and it was a fun movie. But it is a giant mess. They actually added the opening sequence to the movie to try to help people to understand it, and it's just like the head moving around and going deep, and it didn't really help much because the movie's still a mess. It reminds me of a Jodorowsky film, something like The Holy Mountain, that didn't quite hit the mark. It didn't have that depth of genius that Jodorowsky had, or Hodorowski, I'm actually not sure which way it's pronounced, that made it so that it was something spectacular, as well as confusing, bizarre, and just completely out there. It still manages to be fun. It still has a ton of heart. And if you're feeling adventurous, why not give Zardoz a chance? If you guys have seen Zardoz, I want to hear your comments on this. I want to know what you thought of this, what context you saw it in, if it was with friends, if it was just something you stumbled on late at night and couldn't tell if you were actually on LSD or not. So please put that in the comments below. If you enjoy this, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanechoes. For as little as $2 a month, you can help support us. You get postcards, pins, all sorts of other cool stuff. Patreon.com/humanechoes. I hope you guys have an excellent week, and we will see you soon.